Hey everybody, it's Party Elite bringing you some early access content for Total War Warhammer 2. This is Morathi's one and only quest battle, Heartrender and Darksword, pitting her against the High Elves. As always, this is on Legendary difficulty, using the preset army from the quest battle menu. The walls of Arnheim offend the Dark Elves with their pure and wholesome tone. It is time to rip them down and kill whoever is on the other side. Some will need to be taken alive, of course. Should the colony be taken, the High Elf defenders are under no illusion as to what their fates will be, and so prepare to fight like trapped vermin.
My son will learn that I am not a doll that can be cast aside when he tires of me. I shall take this sanctuary, and from the souls within compose a song of screams and torment. Let them come to the shore, sally from their pristine walls, so I can smear them in Asur blood. Bring me this colony, sisters. Kill many, but make sure half are taken alive.
Alright, after that rather rousing speech, let's take a look at army composition on both sides of the field. Morathi brings a Cainite assassin with her alongside 4 units of bleak swords, 2 units of dread spears, 2 units of witch elves, 4 units of dark shards, 2 units of dark riders, a unit of harpies, a reaper bolt thrower, and a war hydra. The initial high elf army is brought to the field by a prince and consists of 6 units of spearmen, 4 units of archers, 2 units of Illyrian reavers, and 2 eagle claw bolt throwers. Right away you can see I am pushing forward. I do need to be aggressive here as the High Elves are the defenders and we are expecting reinforcements to come out of the city as well. So I do need to get aggressive and take care of this initial contingent, cause some damage, and try and provide myself with an advantage when the reinforcements arrive. You'll see I am sending my Dark Riders here off to the side, trying to prepare them for a nice flanking maneuver, get around that little cliff here, this little hill here, and come in for some rear charges while the rest of my army does ever so slowly creep forward. I'm trying to get a front line of bleak swords, of course, while on either flank I do want my dread spears to provide some support against Illyrian reavers if they decide to come in for flanking maneuvers. My harpies, meanwhile, will be very important in shutting down some of that range support, while I do also have the reaper bolt thrower creeping forward ever so slowly, hoping to open shots off at some of those ranged units to try and shut them down nice and early. Again, I like to take care of enemy range support very quickly, because that'll take care of any morale support that they might have, any morale damage support they might have, rather. Meanwhile, you'll see we do have the eagle claw bolt throwers opening shots off, getting a decent amount of hurt done to my witch elves and the bleak swords over here. Great targeting there. These witch elves will die very quickly to such heavy artillery fire. Meanwhile, over here off to the side, you'll see I do have Morathi pushing forward in front of the army, trying to get some initial damage done, drawing some aggro, of course. All of those range units, all of those archers are going to open shots off in the hopes of finishing Morathi off before she's able to close the gap here, but of course that's not really a concern for me, and instead I want to get the penumbral pendulum off here in this straight line. These spearmen are not going to have a good time as that spell comes right through, ripping that line in half, causing a great deal of damage, and giving me an advantage right from the start of this battle before lines even meet. So you'll see a great deal of damage done there. Morathi already has 38 kills, and meanwhile I do have my harpies pushing forward here off to the side to try and get into these archers as they fire away, and meanwhile up in the cliff here I do have my cavalry units trying to come in for that flanking maneuver. Meanwhile, we are closing the gap towards each other. You'll see these witch elves are trying to close the gap to the spearmen, while we do have the Illyrian reavers attracted by Morathi here, diving into her, while my reaper bolt thrower is now able to open shots off. I do have the bleak swords closing the gap into the spearmen, trying to shut them down before they can engage some of my large units. And meanwhile, I do also have my dark shards opening shots off, shutting these Illyrian reavers down right away. Look at the amount of damage they take, falling apart in one volley. Meanwhile, I do have my reaper bolt thrower opening shots at various units as the cavalry now comes around that cliff and is pouring forth to try and engage some of these archers. You'll notice over here we do also have the harpies engaging these archers, and meanwhile off to the side here, way over here by the city, out comes some reinforcements for the High Elves. So a threatening situation for me because I do have to take care of the central engagement before those High Elves are able to join. Meanwhile, you'll see my riders here are able to come in with wonderful rear charges, shutting down these archers, shutting down that range support once and for all, making sure that I get the advantage and shutting that morale damage down from the High Elves. Meanwhile, we have the spearmen up front as well, falling apart. They have been hit by Madness of Cain, afflicted to them by the Witch Elves, forcing them to rampage and stay engaged, while back here you'll see I'm trying to get a nice rear charge for my Bleak Swords. They do get shut down by the Illyrian Reavers, but my Bleak Swords and my Dread Spears will work together to shut them down. Meanwhile, you can see some of these range units now fleeing from the field, trying to pull away, but I do have my Harpies giving chase where possible, or I do have my Dark Riders giving chase as well. Meanwhile, all of that range support coming in, shutting these Illyrian Reavers down right away. The Dark Shards are doing absolutely wonderfully. They are armor piercing, so they do a lot of damage, and of course it does help that I have this massive artillery piece firing away at various units, keeping them at bay. Now the spearmen on my left here are getting closer and closer, so I turn my army around, and meanwhile we do have Murderous Prowess activating, giving me a lot of benefits in battle. So you'll see I do turn my army around and try to focus on this incoming threat. Meanwhile, I do also have Aramir the Prince to worry about, but I'm a little bit more concerned about this advancing force over here. So you'll see the Reaper Bolt Thrower got a little bit of damage done to the spearmen nice and early, reducing their morale significantly, while the Gate Guard over here, seemingly a modified version of the Lothern Sea Guard, are opening shots off, getting some damage into my Bleak Swords here, doing a decent bit of hurt, while my Dark Shards are about to open shots off to try and shut down this initial aggression. But first, I do have the Hydra getting involved as well, trying to provide some assistance with its Fiery Breath attack ability, just firing over my Bleak Swords here, getting that damage into these spearmen and doing a lot of hurt, not only to health but also to morale. You can see it dropping very quickly there as a burn away, burn to death. Great work by the Hydra there, causing a lot of damage not only there, but also triggering some terror over here with these spearmen. So you can see right away those spearmen are turned around and running away. They are very frightened of the situation, as they should be. But meanwhile, we do have the Gate Guard over here opening shots off, but I am responding with some shots from my Reaper Bolt Thrower, while my Dark Shards as well are creeping forward ever so slowly, ever so carefully to return fire. I do need to shut down that range support, while off in the distance you can see we have more reinforcements pouring out of the trees here, while again my Reaper Bolt Thrower continues to provide support and open shots off, get a decent bit of damage done. Meanwhile, over here you'll see the enemy has largely been taken care of. We have entire units here completely shattered. A lot of that range support has been completely taken care of, leaving the field as my Dark Riders go hunting around, while the K-Knight Assassin here is engaging or trying to engage with Aramir the Prince. And over here as well, I do have Morathi trying to get involved, using Spirit Leech every once in a while to try and take care of the Prince and reduce enemy leadership even further. While over here, once again, you'll see I do have the Harpies pulling forward, while my War Hydra as well getting involved in this central engagement here once more, pushing in a lot of that range support coming in, and the War Hydra decides to dive into these spears, not really worried about that anti-large support. And you can see the Reaper Bolt Thrower is doing a lot of work, reducing the Gate Guard here to next to no health, and also reducing their morale to nothing. Meanwhile, we do have some more Illyrian Reavers pouring forth to get involved, and meanwhile the Harpies as well coming in from the side, as I mentioned earlier, to try and shut down some of that range support. You can see the War Hydra here dropping slowly but surely with all of that range support coming in. This War Hydra is in a terrible spot, and I do lose a unit of Bleak Swords, while the Reaper Bolt Thrower continues to open shots at the Gate Guard. I want to try and finish them off. If they return to the fray, I will be in a very tight spot, of course. Meanwhile, you'll see I am turning my attention a little bit, sending the rest of my army into the situation over here, trying to hold the High Elves back in this little bit of a choke point, while my Dark Shards open fire with their armor-piercing bolts, of course, trying to kill these guys before they're able to close the gap. You see a great charge into my Bleak Swords here, but they'll hold the line well enough, falling apart, but I just need them to stay alive for long enough rather than do any serious damage. Meanwhile, the Dread Spears here getting caught up by these Spearmen while they're trying to chase after the Illyrian Reavers here, and my War Hydra as well, trying to get out of a very precarious situation, low on health, low on morale. Regeneration needs to kick in. I need to take advantage of that. While over here, Morathi is using Power of Darkness, hurting herself, but allowing her to recharge some of her power so she can bring in some more spells. And that's exactly what I need her for. Meanwhile, you'll see in the central position here, I do have my Dark Riders engaging the Spearmen, so not an ideal scenario at all. And I'm slowly creeping forward once more just to try and trade range shots with the Gate Guard over here. I need to send my Dark Shards, who have much smaller range, up forward to return fire. Meanwhile, my Witch Elves here getting involved, trying to shut down some of these Spearmen, while again, the Dark Shards fire away. And you can see now I am pushing forward in the right flank over here, able to now penetrate through and get a decent amount of damage done to these range units if I can just close the gap. So I am following through, trying to close that gap. And meanwhile, over here, Morathi once more coming in with the Penumbral Pendulum, doing a decent bit of damage here, trying to finish that front line off once and for all, free up my units so that I can push through and again end the day once and for all, victorious for the Dark Elves. And you can see with the damage from the Penumbral Pendulum, these guys are very close to falling apart. I just need one final push before I can go through. Meanwhile, over here, you'll see the War Hydra has been occupied by the Illyrian Reavers over here, but the War Hydra has regenerated all of its health. So very powerful unit, the War Hydra, able to stay alive despite being nearly dead that one time. So very powerful regenerative capabilities with the War Hydra. They're able to completely regenerate its health, more or less, and then dive back into the fray and chase after some of these Gate Guard. Meanwhile, my Dark Shards are opening shots off at these Gate Guard, trying to get them to rout, trying to get them to leave the field so that I can remove that range support. Meanwhile, off in the distance, you can see it's largely clean up back here. The K-Knight Assassin, though, not really doing anything, just sitting there looking pretty, while my cavalry over here, these Dark Riders, chasing after units that maybe could be left alone at this point, though I do want to try and bring them up here to get some rear and side charges into enemy forces. You'll see, though, we continue to trade shots from a distance here while that front line manages to hold for just a little while longer, and soon these Spearmen do start to rout thanks to some of that help from Morathi, and you'll see Aramir the Prince here as well shatters as he gets close to Morathi, maybe scared, intimidated by her presence, decides to leave the field, while the War Hydra here closing the gap into the Gate Guard over here again. These guys are anti-large, but the War Hydra doesn't really care right now, able to dive in there and scare these guys off potentially as the rest of the army is starting to shatter. So you'll see the War Hydra just creeping forward ever so slowly as the Bleak Sword as well, closing the gap there. War Hydra decides to dive in, toss some of these guys aside, and does a decent bit of damage. And while the Gate Guard will do well in combat, their morale is going to fall apart very readily as that range support comes in from the Dark Shards. And you'll see I do have the Bleak Swords closing the gap as well. The War Hydra causing a lot of damage. Terror kicking in among these Gate Guard just a moment before these guys begin to get frightened off the field as well. And there you have it. A full shatter from the High Elves. And this wonderful city is now mine. The Dark Rider flanking maneuver helped shut down the superior High Elf range capabilities right at the start of the battle. Morathi's magical prowess ensured early damage was guaranteed with Penumbral Pendulum, while the Khainite Assassin kept the enemy prince engaged, reducing his effectiveness. The War Hydra's sheer power is also quite impressive, able to more or less shut down a unit with one use of its breath attack, able to stay engaged in melee, and then able to regenerate most of its health before diving back in. As always, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Total War content. Game 2 releases soon, and I have plenty of early access content to share with you. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, cheers.